It was the summer of 1948. My wife, S, was 8 months pregnant. We had just bought a new house. And for the first time in years, I was out of work. I was sitting in my office one hot afternoon in August, wondering what to do next, when the telephone rang. It was Harry Ackerman, head of West Coast programming for CBS Radio. Jess, he began, "Have you heard the new show Lucille Ball is doing for us? My Favorite Husband." I told him I hadn't heard it. "Well, it's only been in the air for a few weeks. Fox and Davenport have been doing most of the writing, but they're going back to Ozzie and Harriet when the hiatus is over. Would you be interested in writing a script for us?" Well, in the previous 12 years, I had worked with practically every star in Hollywood, but for some reason I had never run into Lucille Ball. I knew who she was, of course. I mean, I'd seen her in Stage Door with Katharine Hepburn and The Big Street with Henry Fonda. The impression I had of Lucille Ball was that of a wisecracking showgirl type. But apart from that, I knew relatively little about her. But Harry had caught me in a receptive mood. "Sure," I said. "Why not?" "That's great. Do you know Lucille?" "No, I've never met her, Harry, but I'll listen to the show this week. When's it on?" "Friday night, 9 o'clock. Why don't I send you over a couple of scripts so you get a feel for the show?" "Okay, that'll be fine. By the way, who's the sponsor?" "We're still looking for one." Well, the scripts arrived the next morning. My Favorite Husband, I learned from reading them, was really sort of a society show. Lucy played Elizabeth Coucott, the gay, sophisticated socialite wife of a bank vice president. But instead of sticking to the pattern set in the previous episodes, I made what turned out to be a fortuitous decision. For 5 years, I had been writing the Baby Snooks radio program starring Fanny Brice as Snooks, a wise, beyond-her-years little girl who constantly drove her daddy crazy. And I decided to make Lucy's character a bit more like Snooks, less sophisticated, more childlike, more impulsive, a stage-struck schemer with an overactive imagination that got her into embarrassing situations. And this would give me an excuse to engage Lucy in some broad slapstick comedy. The storyline involved Liz's scheme to get the lead in the Young Matrons League's annual theater production over husband George's objections. Well, as soon as the program aired in October, I got another call from Harry. "Terrific show, Jess," he said. "How would you like to be head writer of My Favorite Husband? I'd like to sign you to a 5-year exclusive contract with CBS, whether or not the show stays on the air." Well, I told him I'd have to think it over. In the weeks since that first call from Harry, all of my friends had advised me not to take a job writing for Lucille Ball. When I attended a rehearsal, I had noticed 8 or 9 prescription bottles of various shapes and sizes, all lined up in the control room. I remember making a mental note at the time that somewhere in this group there must be, shall we say, a strong personality. And true to my friends' reports, the strong personality had turned out to be Miss Ball. On the other hand, something had clicked when she performed the broad comedy I'd written for her. I knew how lucky I'd been to work for so long with that phenomenally gifted comedienne Fanny Brice, not exactly a weak-willed person herself. There was definitely something special about Lucille Ball, so I decided to take a chance. Now, on my first day at CBS, I met Madeline Pugh and Bob Carroll Jr., who had been writing most of the shows since the departure of Fox and Davenport. Bob and Madeline were 2 of the most worn-out-looking young people I had ever seen. Red-eyed and trembling, they told me they had been writing 4 and 5 scripts a week, rewriting for the producer-director, for the network, for the star. I assured them that in my experience, radio scripts could be written during office hours, except for the occasional emergency. I'll never forget the look on Bob's face. In my favorite Peanuts cartoon, Charlie Brown and Linus are walking dejectedly home from a ball game. Their chins are on their chests, The gloves and a bat they carry are dragging in the ground, and Charlie Brown says, "Well, you win some and you lose some." Linus turns to Charlie Brown and says, "That would be wonderful." And Bob had the very same expression as he said, "It sounds great, but frankly, sir, I don't believe you." Well, the following week's show was a continuation of my favorite husband script. Bob and Madeline were delighted to find that the three of us worked well together, and Bob was amazed when, true to my word, we got to showtime without a major rewrite and without incurring the wrath of our red-headed star. Unfortunately, the same could not be said for the producer-director Gordon Hughes, whose inventory of prescription drugs I had noticed a few weeks before. By the time the show went on the air that Saturday, it had finally become all too clear that Lucy was simply more than he could handle. The Monday after the broadcast, Harry Ackerman walked into my office and informed me that he had decided to replace Gordon Hughes. Would I like to produce and direct the show, in addition to my duties as head writer, for an additional $100 a week? Sure, I told him. Why not? I discovered that Lucy, despite her tough demeanor, was actually quite insecure. She really needed to be dominated. My first inkling of this had come when I was directing her in a scene with her co-star, Dick Denning. In the scene, Dick, who was normally a nice, passive fellow, really had to light into her and tell her off. Lucy came over to me after the first run-through with her eyes all lit up. "Write more scenes like that," she said. "That's great. Let him really tell me off." Surprised by her reaction, I simply said, "Okay." But I remember thinking to myself, and I see how I have to act with you in the future, too.